Hello and welcome to this tutorial video that will show you how to handle and how to use the abstract path SRD Visio shapes for modeling processes subject-oriented in Microsoft Visio. In a previous tutorial video, I've shown you how to install and set the shapes up into your system. And if everything worked out, you should now see the shapes opened on your left-hand side and no new page created. Now, if you're completely new to subject-oriented process modeling, you may not understand everything I'm doing here, because this video is meant for people with experience who come from other modeling tools and simply want to get a hang on how to use Visio for that. For those completely new to subject-oriented modeling, I will post a later video where I go into in-depth and explain how subject-oriented modeling differs from standard approaches using languages like Petri-Nets or BPMN and the like. Now, let's get started on the shapes. Currently, we are on version 0.7. So if you're an earlier version, you may want to grab new version, but I think later versions, for the most part, should handle equally. Now, if we want to get started with subject-oriented modeling, you may know that we start on a so-called subject interaction diagram. The shapes ask you upon loading if you want to make this first page so-called subject interaction diagram. And if you're unsure, the first thing you can do to understand if that's, or to make sure that this is really an interaction diagram, you simply take a standard subject from the shape and drag it onto the page. And if this really is an interaction diagram and the shapes and the macros are running in the background, then he should automatically have created another page with the same name as a subject and an SBD, a so-called subject behavior diagram that we will model later on using this other stencil set. And if we delete this subject again, it should also delete this. Pages like this exist for standard subject, and he also creates these behavior pages for so-called abstract subjects, which are not that much important for now. So we'll delete that again. The other variations of the subject, like the interface subject, the subject extension, and the placeholder, do not have really behavior diagrams. Okay, the subject extension does, but these are special considerations for now. I just want to show you how to model these things, and we can drag several subjects, so-called subjects, onto our page. Now, what do we do with subjects? Of course, since this is a Microsoft Office solution, you can use the full power of Microsoft Office to change the look of these things to your liking. You can give them some color filling, you can change the line topics, and you can add effects to make them look fancy, whatever you like. You can, of course, use the Format Painter tool. You should be familiar from other Microsoft Office solutions to convert the style back to what was before. And of course, you can also, but you should be careful with that, you can change the look of other shape types, for example, the interface subject, to look almost exactly like a standard subject. Now, this is something, the only difference now is a little symbol in the top corner. And I advise you to be careful with this kind of graphical changing the shapes, because all of these have a certain semantical meaning that you may want not to confuse. But back to our subjects. What can we do with our subjects? We can double-click them to open the so-called shape data dialog, where I can set all the important information about this shape. Most important is, of course, the name or the label of the shape that pretty much every shape has. What else can you set here? You can set the ID of the subject, which will be auto-generated upon creation of the shape. And I advise you not to change this except you really want and have a reason to create a manual set ID, which of course should differ from all the other shapes on your page. Also, every page has a comment field, for example, where you can put down information about the shapes. This subject represents a customer in the process. For example, something like this. And most shapes also have this implements fields, which will be left empty for now. It's another feature that will come in a later edition. Especially for subjects, there are the options to make this shape a multi-subject and also set it to a start subject. If I set them here in this shape data dialog, then not much will happen, because the actual update of the shape data will only take place after you press OK. In this case, the subject now has changed. It's now called customer. Equally down here below, the according behavior page that was created upon dragging the shape into the field was also renamed because they are linked. And I made this a start subject and a multi-subject. Some shapes, like the subject shape, have the option to set certain elements via the right-click menu. Of course, you have here some standard options like cut, copy, paste, but subjects also, for example, have the option to reset the multi-subject feature. So I can switch this on and off as I like, but this is actually meant to be our start subject, so I'll leave it at that. Now, another way to set the shape data is a little bit hidden. It's if you go to the view panel and go open the task panel option tag here, you see there is the shape data, which opens another field which displays the current shape data for the subjects or for the shapes selected. So if I go to the customer, you see all the data that was previously shown in the shape data dialog also on this UI element. And in contrast to the shape data dialog, if I change something in here, the update happens directly, while the shape data dialog only changes after pressing OK. For subject 40, I, for example, can call it here the supplier and can make this a multi-subject. So we have customer and supplier in our little example process here. Another interesting tool you can open via the task panes panel here is the size and position tab, which allows you to change, for example, the X direction or the Y position of this shape, but also set the exact width and height. For my system, it's in millimeters because I'm on a European system in metric. But of course, if you are on a American version of Visio, then this might be in inches or whatever you have set your Visio to work on. Now, what you can also do, you can select multiple shapes by either dragging a selection frame around them or by pressing the shift button. In contrast to some other tools, you don't use STRG or the control button, but rather shift to select multiple tools. And then you can, for example, make them all equally wide. For example, 30. Let's change this back to 50. So on. I could also use this to set it to the same height, but you can do this using another option. In Microsoft Visio, you can use the align panel and, for example, say align them equally at the top. The difference to how this works to, for example, PowerPoint is that if you select multiple shapes, it depends on what you select first. For example, if I select first the right shape, the supplier, and then the customer shape, and then say align top, it moves the customer down to the same top line as supplier because it matters which shape you select first. Anyway, this is the standard handling. Now we want to describe process subject-oriented. So we start with subject interaction diagram, but these subjects, of course, don't interact right now, or we haven't described that they interact right now, and for that we use the message connector. Message connector can be created simply by dragging it onto the page, like this, and afterwards we can connect it to the customer shape and the supplier shape, and now the customer is connected to the supplier and sends a so-called message 62. Of course, message 62 is just a placeholder, and we can double-click this message shape and equally open the shape dialog to change the name, for example, call it order. And I could also set the components and some other settings which are of not much importance right now. Now, every message connector has a message box containing the messages that are set to be sent or that can be sent in this process context from the customer to the supplier, and the message box can be moved by using this yellow dot, the controls settings, if you have selected the connector directly. So I can move this, but I can also select the message box directly. You must be careful about selecting the message box, because if I click directly in the middle of it, it may look like you have selected the message box, but if you see a green frame around it, you not have selected the message box, but rather the message itself, which then could be used to drag it outside to create. So now we have removed the message from this message connector box. Of course, we want to put it back in, so we drag it over the frame and it turns green. If you want to make sure that you have selected the actual message connector box, you must click a little bit on the border of this frame, and if you're correct, have placed it correctly, you see only the gray frame, not the green one, and then you can move the message box equally. If you have selected the message box, you should also see this another yellow control handle, which you can use to set the width of the message box and adjust it to your liking. The message box itself does not move along with the connector. So if I move the connector and it's connected right here, you see the message box does not move directly, it's independent. And if you want a quick option to make this look nicer, you can either click on the connector and use the center message box on connector, or you could do the same with the connector itself, which will then move the shape roughly across in the middle of this connector that connects customer and supplier with the order. Now, messages are a little bit different from all the other shapes. If I create a new message in here, it creates a new version of this message, or creates a new message itself. For example, this is message 64 and this is message 66. But if I copy a message directly on the page, for example, with right click, copy and then paste, it does not create a new message, but rather really a copy of message 64, which has the same name and the same ID. As you can see, ID and message are equally. And these things are linked, so if I rename this message, for example, to example message, it will change every instance of this message on the whole page. Rename them. So this is a nice tool, but if you want really to create a new message, create it either by dragging it here from the side page, or another option to create a new page, create a new message, is by clicking on the message connector or select one message, go over the right click menu and say, well, insert message after or before. And yet another one is if you have selected the message box, at some point he doesn't show it right now, there is a little there should be a little error which is not shown here, so let's not worry about that too much. Let's delete these things and be happy that our customer can send an order now to the customer and supplier. Of course, if you have sent an order to a supplier, the supplier needs to answer, and so we must connect another connector that leads from supplier to customer. We can do so by simply dragging a new connector from the side, but there are other options to do that. If we go, and at the end of the last video, I showed you that you should activate the Auto Connect button here under Views. And if you have activated this, you must do this individually for every drawing that you're working on. If you have activated this, you notice that now if you hover your mouse over a shape that can be auto-connected to other shapes, these little blue arrows appear, which allow you to create, for example, this little bar shows you what you can create automatically. In this case, I said create new subject, and he will automatically create a subject and connect it by a connector, which we don't want to do right now because we want to do something else. We don't want to create a new subject, but rather connect the existing one to the customer here. So he creates a new shape and adjusts it. So now we have our reply. And what kind of supplier reply? Of course, you can send the delivery of the goods we have just ordered. Equally, of course, we could send another message called note of decline because he cannot supply our offer. If you want to connect shapes, you can see if I take one of these connector ends and drag them over the shape, I can either drag the shape over the whole body of the shape and let it auto-connected, or I can say directly to go to one of these connector points and adjust it to there. For example, if I just want to have some weird lining up, I can make sure that this outgoing connection starts here and ends there. This is a tool which you may find useful at some point. Now, if for some reason you may find that the existing 12 connection points, 3 on every side, are not enough and you want a special connection point, you can always add more connection points later on by going to the home panel, and in the middle under tools you'll find this little X, the connection point tool, which allows you, if you click on the shape, to manipulate the existing ones but also add new ones by selecting the shape where you want to add new ones, pressing the STRG button, which changes the cursor slightly to a plus sign, which allows you to drop new connection points on an existing shape. So your connector starts at a point that you desire. From a modeling point of view, this doesn't make any difference, but from visual point of view, you might want to do that. Now, I could of course spend some time to adjust this. Another quite nice little thing about these connectors is by standard they are set to being right-angled connectors, but if you like, you can set them to curved or most common to a straight connector, and then, for example, recenter this on the message box to have a nice looking diagram. So this much I can show you about how to model subject interaction diagrams. Now, I said that, of course, to every subject there's a so-called behavior diagram, and I can go there simply by clicking on the according page here and go back and switch in between the different different page types. And you notice if I go to a page that is a behavior diagram, he automatically changes the active stencil set to that meant for subject behavior diagram pages. So if I go back to the subject interaction diagram, he changes back to the view I had in the beginning with subjects and message connectors. Or if I go back to customers, he shows me this stencil set. Now, there are other ways to go to the according pages. One is by using this overview tab here, where I can choose from a list of all existing pages. At the moment, it's only the 3 of them, with customer, supplier, and page 1. Of course, I can rename pages. For example, my SID, which you could also do for these ones here, but I advise you not to do that. If I rename this to, for example, a customer, it will still allow me to draw this, but you will lose overview. So let's change this back to our name we had before, customer, which looks nicer. Now, to adjust the sizes, of course, I can make this wider, so it really reads right. I can, of course, change the size and so on. But I wanted to talk about how to travel from subject interaction diagram to the corresponding behavior diagram. Every subject shape with a behavior diagram has a built-in link that is automatically added. So if I press this here, I get directed to my corresponding diagram. If I want to go back, there's another thing. In every subject behavior diagram is a built-in link. So when I click somewhere on this page on a white space, not on a shape, but on a white space, I can open the context menu where I get the options to follow a link back to the first page, layer 0, called, and I'm back here. So this is a nice little way to navigate this diagram, these diagrams. Now, we go to our customer and want to model. Sometimes maybe it's a little hint. For some reason, he doesn't always like it, and you have always try a second time to actually follow the link to our subject behavior diagram. And on a subject behavior diagram, you find all the states you're used to. In this case, we are on a customer, and a customer starts with a function state, which we can define as a start state via a right-click menu, but also, of course, again, via the shape data dialog. States can be start states or end states, and they can have refinements, which is of no importance for now. They have an ID and some other options which are for later advanced modeling chapters. For now, let's simply call the state fill out the order form. Looks nice. And now I want to create a next state. Since I have activated Auto Connect, it gives me the options to choose a follow-up state. In this case, of course, after I've filled out an order form, I want to send it off. So my next shape is a send state. And every standard function state is exited via a function transition or standard transition arc, which is then I can note down what the result of the was order form filled out. That's nice. And I'm now in the send state, which is the default name, and I want to change this, of course, to send off the order form. And I will continue with the receive state, because after I filled out the order, I must wait for it. Now, for some reason, Visio only rarely allows me to find a direct route. Sometimes you have to readjust it manually. This is a little bug into Visio. Otherwise, you will see there's now a difference between standard, so-called standard transitions or function transitions. You can also create them by dragging them from the left side here and model them. Now, in a send state, if you exit the send state, of course, this is only should be done by using a so-called send transition. They're here. They get automatically created, but you can, of course, drag them in equally. Let's delete this again, because we don't want to model this. Now, send transition is a little bit different from a function transition. In this case, you can, or you must select the receiver of the message you want to send off. In this case, our subject, since we are in the customer right here, the only option we've modeled in the subject interaction diagram is that you can communicate with a supplier and you can send off a message or down. Oh, that's of course a little typo. And to alleviate that, of course, I could go back to the subject interaction diagram and change the message name there, but there's another option. If you go to the special ALPS S-BPM tab here, you have the options to rename the messages which opens this rename dialog, where we have this option to change the names. You use this dialog by simply choosing the message and giving it a new label name. You cannot change the ID, but only the name. So let's rename this. And in the list it has already changed it, so we close it up, and you can see now the message has been renamed. But also, if you go here, the message has also been changed in our subject, the action diagram. Now, there's a third way to go back. You can follow the link via right-click menu. In Visio, you have another option. If you press the control button and press on it, you follow a link back to our nice little interaction diagram. Now, after we have filled out the order and send it off, we are in a receive state where we wait for an answer. And there are two options. One option is that we receive from the from the supplier the delivery, and you see that the receive transition has even more data, but the only ones really of importance to you is, of course, the send of message and message receiver and the comment function. Everything else, leave it as it is for now. Now, if we get from the supplier our delivery, we can be happy, and in that case this is an end state. And if we receive from the supplier the option or a note of decline, then we must think what to do next, and we'll leave it as an end state for now, because this is only a quick modeling tutorial. Of course, after modeling the behavior of our customer, we want to go now to model our supplier. And here's a nice little thing, that if you have configured receive or send transition to send to a certain subject, it has a built-in link to go actually to the behavior diagram of this actor, which you can follow using the right-click menu here, or by pressing the control button and follow the link. And we're automatically now on the supplier page. This allows easy navigation in between subjects, or if you later on view your model, to see if you can where a message ends and what happens after the message was received. Now, of course, we now want to model our supplier, and if he gets delivery, he has to check his order book and see if everything is okay. And if the order book is not okay, we must see. So if the order book says no, not possible to fulfill the order, then we're in a send state, send decline, and we send off our message. That happens sometimes. If you not click the correct one, then he sometimes opens another dialog, which you should cancel to go to the real shaped dialog. So we choose a customer and as an option, and a note delivery or note of decline. We want to send a note of decline here to our function state, and then we simply call this end and an end state. And I have now made this a start state to show you something else, because for now the question is, you may have wondered, why is he checking his order book? How does he know that he received something? Of course, I've forgotten to place a receive state in the beginning that actually allows me to receive the order from our customer. Let's add this very quickly. So now we have received the order, customer. And here we have some little bug where it didn't turn out that good. A little update changes this back. Now, back to our start state. this is now supposed to be our start state. So we set this to be the start state. And you have seen that the start symbol went from the shape down below to this one. The reason is that in path diagrams, in each behavior diagram, there can only be one start state, while in theory, many different states can be end states. So if we model now here, order can be fulfilled. Then we commission the order. And after we have done that, order has been commissioned, so this task is finished. We go to the send state, send of the order. Now we model, in this case, to the customer, and we send a note, not now of the client, we will send now of the delivery. And this is another end state, and in this case, order fulfilled. And this is also an end state, just to give you a quick introduction to modeling. Okay, now this is pretty much everything you need to know to get started. Also, of course, on the behavior diagram, you can use all the other stuff I've shown you. There are some other things in the options. For example, you can create new diagram types. You convert a current document to an SID page. Most importantly, if you want to create a second SID, subject and action diagram, you can define another page to be a subject and action diagram and place subjects on there if everything works out. And with that, I will want to end this little tutorial I thank you for your attention and look forward to another videos in the future. Thank you very much and goodbye.